Hey team, hope you're well. Today I'm going to make a video explaining what I actually do as part of my process if I am helping a client and being their representative as their mortgage advisor. So I kind of want to just take through sort of A to Z. Maybe there are some details that I miss in this video of what I actually provide for my clients and what I try achieve for them. But I want to just highlight it so you actually have and understand what the expectation is of maybe if you want to work with me and have me as your broker. So let's get into the details of what I do. So normally, initially, when I'm first speaking with a client, there are some key fundamentals of what we need to understand with the position of if we're going to do an application to the bank and try achieve something of what we need to know. So one is a servicing assessment. So Blueprint Finance, the company I work at, we have this cool spreadsheet that is very reminiscent of a lot of the main bank calculators. So we can't get it necessarily exact and can't actually disclose the main bank calculators and what they use to the public is something we can't do, but we can, forecast and have pretty similar assessments regarding, these metrics in an Excel spreadsheet we put together. So how this calculator works, if you're curious, is we can actually look at the fixed recurring incomes that's coming into someone, whether through it's their PAYE salary or if they're self-employed, we can figure out what those metrics actually are. So the recurring income coming in and potential rental income as well, or any other recurring income that's going to be in perpetuity and not have any sort of expiry date. That's how we assess it. Same for household expenses. We have this tab or section here where we can see, depending on who's applying in an application, how this would stack up and what the recurring expenses are for a household. And with this data, alongside the debt position of a client, we can review this. We can calculate either a surplus of a deficit of what they can borrow. So that's what goes into detail with a servicing assessment to figuring out the borrowing ability. With my experience now being in the industry for about 2 years and talking with lots and lots of clients, I can generally figure out within about 5 minutes around about, I would say, within 80% of what a client is capable of borrowing, but this is more so just reassuring with more accuracy, more clarity of what someone is capable of borrowing. So this is the calculator we use. Another one is reviewing a client's equity position. So sometimes if you're a first home buyer, you might not necessarily have like equity per se. You're going to be using probably KiwiSaver or cash savings towards a deposit in most cases. But another thing I like to provide is I like to go through how the bank is looking at the property you potentially currently own if you already own a mortgage already, and reviewing how all of that works. And another thing as well is if you're potentially looking at a property, how the bank is valuing that property and what that means and how it has significance. So for example, I think I've highlighted this quite a lot on the channel. You've probably seen some previous videos if you're watching this one, but for example, my property I bought for $327,000 just over a year ago. The property valuation for the property I bought is $440,000 on the bank's valuation tool. So that had a lot of significance in my judgment to make the decision for buying this property. And that's something I like to go through with clients. So anytime someone's looking at a potential property, we'll review that and go into detail of what that means moving forward and how that's going to set them up from a short, mid to long-term position moving forward. So we go through that pretty in detail and what that means. And also moving on from that, then we'll look at the cash flow given someone's position and what that means moving forward. So if they have an existing mortgage, we will look into ways maybe how we could refine and structure a mortgage differently that will make more sense for a client situation. That's what we like to go through. And we'll evaluate, pros and cons, maybe if there is an incentive to move from one bank to another, and also what the cons would be if you were to move, like break fees, maybe if there's a clawback that needs to be paid from a cashback contribution you previously received, lawyer fees, etc. All of those things. So we do an analysis on determining with the existing lending, if you have a mortgage already, if it makes sense to move, and also if you're taking on future lending to say buy another property, or maybe if you're wanting a top up for renovations or buying a car or whatever that additional lending is for. We review that and come up with a idea of what repayments could look like, what structure is best to go through. So majority of the time, this is where I find I'll be spending the most time with the client refining this, especially if they have an existing mortgage already, and just coming up with some scenarios and appropriate ways to maybe structure the lending for both existing and future lending. Another one too that is important, especially when acquiring a property, is determining the cash flow. You might have seen this calculator I've used on other videos before, but I always like to do that sort of assessment of how that stacks up and maybe comparing that to say other properties that maybe I've seen other people been acquiring, and also myself personally, running the numbers on them, maybe determining what the yield is for the property and how much is required to top up for a property acquisition, or how much cash flow you would be getting from day one potentially if you're buying quite well. So we run through those things. Another thing personally I like to do as well as part of my service, I do have to be a little bit careful of this because I can't be responsible. I can't say for a client to buy a specific property. It goes against my a huge conflict of interest with me being a financial advisor. If I say, you should buy 154 Jackson Street or whatever the address is for the property, and the client buys it because of me, it's a conflict of interest because I'm going to be getting paid a commission from the fact that this person that I'm working with is buying this property because I've told them to. So it's a conflict. But what I do like to do as part of my service, though, is display how you can navigate trying to find a property that is within your specifications, right? A lot of brokers obviously wouldn't go that extra mile, but it's something I like to do because I don't think a lot of people that are actively looking in property know how to necessarily navigate and try, negotiate and try, buy a property, so to speak, right? It's not something, you learn in school. And because I'm doing it so actively, I try give that guidance to a client of mine and make sure also throughout the whole process, they're negotiating quite well and buying a property, ideally under the market value. And I'll give them tips and tricks on how to navigate that whole process without specifically saying which property to buy, just more so giving them the guidance of how the whole process works in more detail. So if you're a bit concerned about that and you don't feel like maybe the person you've spoken with, whether it's with the bank directly or your existing mortgage broker does that, that's something I can definitely help with. So bit of a shameless plug there, but this YouTube channel, I'll be completely honest, is an attempt to try win your business, right? If you're watching this video, I'm trying to win your business here. That's exactly what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to be providing as much value as I can on the videos, for one, so you can keep consuming and see these things for free, where if you don't want to work with me, you can, or you can fill out the details in the description of your position, and I can see how I could help out and maybe potentially benefit through maybe on a call like this where we go through your position and see what can be done. So that's normally what I do with the client and the fundamentals. There might be some additional things where I help out with, but that's the core fundamentals. So if you're interested in that stuff, again, like I said, I'll leave the details in the description of how you can get in contact with me and we can see what your options are and maybe how we can improve your position. Cheers, guys.